Good morning, everyone. Welcome to the Zero Carbon Future Pavilion, sponsored by Clean Air Task Force. My name is Carlos Leipner, and I lead the nuclear program at CATF, and it's a pleasure to welcome you here today. We have an exciting topic to discuss, and perhaps very timely. It's nuclear energy, promising pathway to zero carbon hydrogen at scale. And very excited to bring this topic for discussion today. We have a very distinguished list of guests and speakers today. Very honored to have them here with us today. But first, perhaps why are we talking about this theme at all, right? So as we contemplate decarbonizing the global energy system, we recognize that there are many, many areas and segments that are very hard to abate emissions. Not only that, it's very hard to electrify many of these segments, such as marine shipping, some industrial processes, and many others. And that those segments today rely a lot on fossil fuels. So as we look for alternative solutions for that, hydrogen has become one of the key vectors for some potential solutions to fill in this gap. And we see a huge demand for hydrogen, and we need alternative solutions for clean energy forms to generate hydrogen. So we'll discuss some of these today. And so with us this morning, I'm very pleased to welcome our guests. First, let me introduce you to Diane Cameron. Very honored to have you here, Diane. She's head of the Nuclear Technology Development and Economics Division at the OECD Nuclear Energy Agency. In her role at the NEA, she leads an expert team of economists and scientists that support energy policy and nuclear energy policy development among NEA member countries. So we're very pleased to have you here. Thank you so much, Diane. Next, we have Kirsty Kogan. She's founder and managing partner at TerraPraxis. She's internationally advisor to governments, industries, NGOs, investors. She has more than 15 years experience as a senior advisor to government on climate and energy policy. And she's also a managing partner at Lucid Catalyst, which is a highly specialized international consultancy focused on large-scale, affordable, market-based decarbonization solutions for the global economy. So, Kirsty, thank you so much for being here, and looking forward to hearing your comments. Next, Mr. Juan Wei. Wei Wan, apologies. He's the Director of Division of Planning, Information, and Knowledge Management in the Department of Nuclear Energy at the International Atomic Energy Agency. Before he joined the IAEA, he had been Director General at the Department of International Cooperation at the China Atomic Energy Authority, a permanent mission at the IAEA. He was also had different posts, including being posted in the Chinese Embassy in Washington, D.C. as a science attaché. And he also had various technical roles and executive roles at the China National Nuclear Corporation, including being part of the startup team at the Daya Bay nuclear power plant. So that's very interesting. Thank you for being here, Wei. Next, Yves Desbazelles. He's from France and graduated from electrical engineering from the École Supérieure d'Électricité. And also has an MBA. And during his very successful career, he's been involved in different businesses and responsibilities at EDF, nuclear engineering, hydro, thermal power projects, and others, both in France, US, as well as Asia, where he actually was stationed for 5 years. His previous position as EDF representative for energy in Brussels has provided him an in-depth knowledge of the EU institutions and Brussels stakeholders at large. And today he's the Director General of the Nuclear Europe organization. Thank you for being here, Yves. And last but certainly not least, very pleased to welcome here Katie Jazira. Katie is the Vice President of Corporate Affairs at EPRI in the United States, which is a global independent nonprofit energy research and development and deployment institute. For 30 years, Katie has championed economic development through multi-stakeholder initiatives. She has helped or advised many government, company, and association leaders break new ground in promoting the affordability, reliability, and resilience of energy, water, and other critical infrastructures. At EPRI, she leads government and external engagements, corporate and technical communications, and media relations. And she brings a strategic approach to addressing energy transition challenges and science-based solutions. So, Katie, thank you so much for being here and sharing those perspectives as well. So, in order to frame the context, I'm just going to spend a few minutes here to introduce more of the theme about why nuclear hydrogen. I think we already mentioned, and you've seen perhaps through many different sessions this week and last week, the increased energy use and increased energy demand in the world. But as we look at the global energy matrix, the vast majority of the energy demand and use is really focused on or dependent on fossil fuels. That's up to 80% of the global energy matrix. And so that's what we're trying to address. And we are living through an energy transition period where we're transitioning from a very carbon-intensive energy system. As you can see here, not just electricity, but most for other needs, we rely on fossil energy, liquid petroleum, natural gas, coal, and others. The goal is to really change to a decarbonized energy system that could be dependent not only on renewables, but on super hot rock, geothermal, nuclear energy, and others. The goal is to decarbonize these segments. Hydrogen, we talk a lot about them. I think today we produce around 90 tons, metric tons of hydrogen globally per year. There are estimates that by the mid-century we will reach at least 500 million metric tons, if not up to 1 billion metric tons a year of demand. That would require an incredible amount of energy to produce that hydrogen. And we expect and hope that most of that energy will be clean. And to do that, there's a tremendous expectation on renewables to achieve that. We think that nuclear energy, among other clean sources, can play a very pivotal role in providing that energy to produce clean hydrogen going forward. Nuclear energy and nuclear technology can provide different pathways for clean hydrogen generation, as you can see here. We can rely on existing reactors, which are light water reactor-based technologies, both through electricity for low temperature electrolysis, and we're seeing some advanced reactors in development and will get to the market by this decade that can provide additional pathways through high temperature electrolysis, thermo-chemical water splitting, and other processes. All this to produce zero carbon hydrogen. So nuclear technology can play a huge role on this. And some of the factors or characteristics of nuclear that are very interesting to note is very zero emissions generation, no greenhouse gases, as you know, and even from a life cycle perspective, nuclear energy, nuclear technology has a very small footprint of emissions. It provides firm, reliable, very high capacity factor energy, so this is very important, particularly for hydrogen production, so that it can be very efficient. Very energy dense. It doesn't require a lot of land. I think some of the numbers we've seen for a 1,000 megawatt plant that usually will require a 1 square mile. A similar plant power based on solar would take 75 times that, and with wind up to 350 times that amount of space. So we can see how nuclear power can really make a difference here. And we see the advent of advanced reactors with many different features, including simplification and advanced modular construction techniques that can reduce cost and be deployed a lot quicker. So we're looking forward to those come to the market. These different technologies that we're talking about will be able to address different needs beyond just electric generation. As you can see here from the top half of this slide, various different reactor technologies can actually have very high operating temperature characteristics, which can then be matched to different industrial applications, which then is very helpful here as we talk about hydrogen production. There are many nuclear hydrogen projects already ongoing around the world. This is just a small sample. We have several projects ongoing in the United States through the support of the Department of Energy. that involve low temperature electrolysis projects as well as a high temperature electrolysis project. I'd like to maybe highlight the INL, the Idaho National Lab high temperature electrolysis demonstration that has several hundred hours already producing clean hydrogen through a high temperature electrolysis, proving that they can do this at around 37, 38 kilowatts per kilogram, which is significantly more efficient than other processes. And even Brazil has also a plant that's already generating hydrogen at Angra. They do seawater electrolysis, and a byproduct of that is hydrogen, which right now is just being released to the atmosphere, and the project is to capture that for different applications. In Europe, obviously, we've heard many different projects related to nuclear hydrogen. So it's not something as a theory, it's coming out to the market. And at Clean Air Task Force last year, we gathered together a group of folks and interested parties, and we developed and created this Nuclear Hydrogen Initiative, which is a platform, a forum for discussion that bridges the nuclear industry to the overall hydrogen ecosystem. We have close to 80 different organizations globally involved in this initiative, and we invite you, if you have interest, to seek us out so that you can also participate. So with that, I would like to start the discussion here, invite Diane Cameron to share some of your perspectives on nuclear hydrogen. Here we go.
Thank you very much, and thank you for the invitation to participate in this discussion in this wonderful pavilion that you've put together. And I also just want to tip my hat to Clean Air Task Force for all the programming that you've done here this week at COP27. I truly appreciate it, and it's been really exceptional, bringing nuclear and non-nuclear parts of the solution space together in a range of conversations. So thank you for that. I am absolutely honored to be leading the delegation for the Nuclear Energy Agency, which is an agency of the OECD here at COP27. NEA, or the Nuclear Energy Agency, we are an international organization. We are a member-driven organization with 34 member countries. Our members are national governments, so we are paid by public monies, and our role is to support our member countries as they seek to advance their priorities in the area of nuclear energy, and increasingly that is situated squarely within broader strategic priorities on energy security and net zero. And hydrogen is an area of great interest to our member countries. In fact, I would note that there's an enormous amount of excitement and momentum around the world about the potential role that hydrogen can play, a hydrogen economy, how that could contribute to our net zero ambitions. And so I'll just share a few of our key findings and some of the work that we've done at the NEA on this topic. For starters, hydrogen, of course, is exciting for a number of different reasons. It has the potential to be a vector for energy storage. It has the potential to help us with synthetic fuels to decarbonize transportation. It has the potential to help us with energy storage to offset intermittency and variability of certain renewable sources of power. But equally importantly, even if all of that very exciting work never comes to pass, hydrogen is already an important chemical feedstock in ammonia and fertilizer production. So what we're really talking about here is a two-step process. We need to decarbonize existing hydrogen production today, which is a matter not only of climate change mitigation, but also of food security around the world. And second step is we need to prepare for an immense growth in hydrogen demand globally. Today, 90 million tons of hydrogen is used for fertilizer production around the world. And that's a really important part of maintaining food supply and food security in different parts of the world. That is produced almost exclusively from unabated fossil fuels, emitting on the order of 1 gigatons of carbon dioxide emissions, which is about 3% of global energy-related carbon dioxide emissions around the world. So one thing is clear. There is no net zero without decarbonized hydrogen, and that's true whether or not hydrogen is an energy vector because of the role that hydrogen plays today in the food systems. really three options for producing hydrogen, net zero hydrogen. It can be produced with nuclear power, and there are a variety of technologies that Carlos has already highlighted for us. It can be produced through electrolyzers on the grid, but we know that net zero grids of the future also require nuclear. Or it could be produced with renewable energy. Herein lies the challenge, though. Many of the industrial consumers of hydrogen who use hydrogen as a chemical feedstock require a constant supply of hydrogen for their processes, which makes the matching of hydrogen produced from variable renewables very challenging for those consumers. And so we believe that sort of in these simplest of terms, each of these three pathways, whether we're relying primarily on nuclear, primarily on the grid, or primarily on renewables, each one of these scenarios has to be rounded out with nuclear-produced hydrogen for a net zero future. I'd like to just showcase, and some of you will have picked up a copy on your seats on your way in. This is the Nuclear Hydrogen Digest. We were very pleased to be the coordinators of this product. We had the launch with clean energy ministers at the Clean Energy Ministerial in Pittsburgh earlier this year, and we're very pleased to be launching it here with climate ministers in Egypt. You will see in here a snapshot of about 12 different initiatives around the world. Our sense is that the vast majority of ministers, be they energy ministers or climate ministers, have at this point been briefed and are starting to get excited about the potential role of hydrogen. And now what we are aiming to do with this product is raise their awareness about the role of nuclear in that space. We have in here a synopsis of our own recent publication from the Nuclear Energy Agency on hydrogen, where we do modeling on the 2035 timescale. We're looking at the economics and the competitiveness of hydrogen produced from low and high temperature electrolysis from existing nuclear technologies. And our optimization model shows that nuclear energy can be very competitive at the plant level. It actually is even more competitive when we start to look at value chain costs, and again, even more competitive when we look at systems level costs, where you integrate hydrogen into an electricity system grid. So happy to talk more about that as we proceed with the discussion, but I'll leave it there for now.
Fantastic. Thank you, Diane, very much for your words and the exciting things that are happening indeed. Kirsty, next to you, and from TerraPraxis and Lucid Catalyst, there's been a lot of announcements recently, a lot of activities, partnerships announced, and I wonder if you could maybe give your perspectives on this topic of hydrogen and nuclear. What do you think?
Thanks, Carlos. And I just would also like to echo Deanne's, compliments and congratulations to CATF for hosting this program of activities here at the COP. It's wonderful to see you all here as well, so thank you so much for inviting me. My name's Kirsty Gogan, as Carlos introduced me as co-founder and managing director of TerraPraxis, which is a non-profit developing, inventing, incubating very scalable solutions for the toughest parts of our decarbonization challenge. And we have indeed at this COP been making a whole bunch of announcements around one of our main programs of work, which is repowering coal plants, which is essentially a program to replace the coal boiler with small modular reactors co-located at existing coal plants, enabling the continued use of the existing power island, but without any longer burning coal, by supplying heat and power with SMRs instead. And that's a great way to kind of maintain the jobs and the socioeconomic benefits associated with those plants, but also, and of course, the transmission, but without the emissions. And I guess, that is informed by an organizing principle for TerraPraxis, which is the idea that we have 27 years to 2050. And we need to entirely decarbonize our global energy infrastructure and possibly double or even triple it to meet rising global energy demand. And the scale and the urgency of that challenge requires that if we can possibly repurpose existing infrastructure, then we should do so. So that was an example of repurposing the existing thermal energy plants and their associated transmission. But what I'll talk with you today about is how we can repurpose the liquid fuels global infrastructure. So today we use 100 million barrels of oil per day, and a lot of that oil and gas is used in sectors, parts of our economy that are really difficult to electrify. And obviously we know that, you know, heavy transport like aviation and shipping is really tough to decarbonize, to electrify. And also industrial applications, steel, cement, concrete, and chemicals, you know, upon which, you know, our modern global economy really depends, really tough to electrify. So ideally what we need are drop-in substitute fuels that we can continue to use in the existing infrastructure. And hydrogen is an absolutely critical ingredient in those drop-in substitute fuels. So we have an analogy that we like to use called the Impossible Burger, which, you know, many of you might know is a plant-based meat substitute. It looks like a burger, it tastes like a burger. You can buy it in every Burger King around the country, around the United States. It doesn't require any behavior change. And, you know, that's what we're sort of trying to develop here, are impossible burgers for climate. So if we were to develop substitute drop-in liquid fuels as impossible burgers for climate, then we need to match somehow the cost and the performance of the fossil fuels that we use today. So if you were to produce, for example, ammonia, which could potentially be used in the marine sector, or synthetic hydrocarbons, which could be potentially used in the aviation sector, the hydrogen target cost to match, you know, the long-term average cost of fossil fuels in those sectors, the hydrogen as the key ingredient in those drop-in substitute fuels would need to be around $1 a kilogram. So that's our target cost for the hydrogen production. Now, we published a report in September 2020, which is called The Missing Link to a Livable Climate, and that sets out a strategy for decarbonizing the whole of the 100 million barrels of oil per day that we currently use. And in that report, we set out the kind of key cost drivers for hydrogen production, and I'll just describe them to you. There's only 4. Okay, so the 4 key cost drivers for hydrogen production are, firstly, the capital cost of the electricity supply, the capital cost of the electrolyzers, the efficiency of the electrolyzers, and the capacity factor of the power that you're using. So those are the 4 key things. Now, the interesting thing about nuclear energy is that it starts to match really well to getting you some good outcomes against those cost drivers, because as Carlos was outlining in his opening remarks, nuclear energy it's very energy dense, has a very small environmental footprint, which is fantastic for achieving a very large scale of energy output. But importantly, it also has a high capacity factor, and it not only produces power, potentially quite cheaply depending on the delivery model, which I'll talk about in a moment, but it also makes heat. And the application of heat in electrolysis increases the efficiency of the electrolyzers. So let's remember the 4 cost drivers for hydrogen production: efficiency, capacity factor, cost of power, and capital cost of electrolyzers. So we can control some of those by bringing nuclear energy with very high capacity factors. And if we develop new business models, new delivery models for delivering that hydrogen production, then you can achieve very low costs. Now, in this document that Deanne presented, which I'll just try and lift up. Oh, thanks. Here's my glamorous assistant here. So you can see in this document at the back there's a picture of the hydrogen gigafactory. And this is a fully integrated manufacturing, installation, and production facility making hydrogen for less than $1 a kilogram. So, you know, what we have here is really a kind of completely new business model for nuclear energy. It's really different from the way that the nuclear industry has traditionally thought about its value proposition, where it's very constrained by the size of the electricity market, access to long-term power purchase agreements, a need for a grid connection. All of those things actually have constrained very much both the siting locations and the scale of the deployment. If you are no longer constrained by those things because you're making a commodity rather than electricity, you're making a commodity that can be stored, transported, exported to global markets, then you're liberated in terms of your siting decisions. You can go where it's convenient for you, and you can develop, in this case, a 20 gigawatt thermal, so it's pretty large, 20 gigawatt thermal hydrogen production facility with 36 high temperature reactors in the reactor farm here that are being manufactured on site and installed, and then they're producing heat and power contributing to the electrolysis, high temperature electrolysis, making 2 million tons of hydrogen per year. You could produce 5 million tons of ammonia per year if you added on some synthetic fuels production facility. And the revenue streams include not only power and heat and hydrogen, which could be hooked up to the grid. So you've got a 20 gigawatt backup energy supply for your future electricity grid with high renewables penetration, or you could be just filling up your reactor farm and then continuing to manufacture the reactors and sending them off to repower some coal plants. Now, there's another strategy. Thank you, Deanne. That's very kind. There's another strategy which involves, rather than bringing your factory to the project, essentially, which is bringing your project to the factory, which is, in this case, going to a world-class shipyard to make your entire fuels production facility in a very high productivity, world-class manufacturing environment, such as a Korean or Japanese shipyard, for example. And we were commissioned by EPRI to produce a report about that. And I don't know if you're planning to speak about that, but I won't steal your thunder if so. But I'd encourage you to look at the Missing Link to a Livable Climate report, and also to the work that EPRI has commissioned on this topic. And the final thing I would say is that we mentioned the energy density, the small environmental footprint. 10 of these gigafactories would entirely replace the UK's current oil and gas supply. Just 10, with an almost indiscernible environmental footprint. So this is a strategy that is really meeting the needs for energy security as well as affordability and decarbonisation, and importantly is not competing with the pathways for massive deployment of renewable energy. We're not competing for space, we're not competing for supply chains, and we're producing valued commodities and services which are very complementary to the important role that wind and solar are going to play in the decarbonisation of our electricity system. So thank you so much.
Thank you so much, Kirsty. Very interesting, innovative model that you've talked about, the gigafactories. So we need to really pay more attention to that. Thank you for that. Next, so from the IEA, I mean, you all have been on the forefront in dealing with innovation and nuclear development. Could you elaborate perhaps the efforts that IEA are doing on this space of hydrogen?
Thank you very much. I hope the mask. No, I can go without the slides.
Okay.
Thank you very much. My name is Huang Wei. Apologize for wearing a mask because I don't feel well. This morning I tried to see if I need to come or not, but at the end I think I need still to be here to participate in this very important discussion. The reason why, because if you look at all around this COP27, hydrogen is almost in every pavilion. They talk about it, but very few talk about nuclear hydrogen. So that's why that's the purpose we come here from IEA. I hope if you have a chance to be in the Atoms for Climate pavilion, this is the first time that such big a pavilion show up in the COP. I hope you haven't been there. Please go there. We have a lot of information to share with you. I think when we talk about the hydrogen, I think among the nuclear community, we all have this agreement that nuclear can contribute to that one. Given the nuclear low carbon electricity and the low carbon heat, this thing can definitely contribute to this decarbonization of this hard-to-abate sector, hydrogen. So thank you for your very informative overview, because they covered the whole status. I don't need to go repeat it again. I just take the chance to share what the agency has done in this area. As an international organization within the UN system, we have 175 members. Among them, we have 32 countries using nuclear power, but some of them are phasing out. But the majority still continue to use the nuclear power for the decarbonization effort and also energy security. And also additional 30 countries are interested in using nuclear in the coming decades. During this process, agency provided technical support to facilitate the development of a new technology to make sure the nuclear can be improved in this pathway when the global try to fight climate change and energy security. But from agency perspective, in the past, hydrogen is just within this kind of a co-generation concept. So we put it together, try to see how nuclear can contribute to this electricity sector and also the other sectors, and to use the heat, to use district heat and desalination, and also industry process. We have a lot of publication. We have a lot of research in cooperation with our member states. But recently, we start to give additional focuses on the hydrogen, because we think that is the main area we can contribute and work with our partners, NEA, also in nuclear industry, to show the value of nuclear. For example, last year, agency, in addition to the modeling tool we have, we are developing a new tool we call FRAMES, which kind of integrate modeling system, which can quantify some information about non-electrical area, including the hydrogen. So we had some cooperation with Urenco, and to show, to work on the UK case to see what is the economics implication of hydrogen if we go with a nuclear. So I think that we have a quite successful cooperation and to showcase that is what is the potential and what kind of condition nuclear can achieve this objective. And also along this line, this year, just last week, our DG Grossi announced a new initiative which is called Atoms for Net Zero. The concept of this one is just try to make additional efforts with our member states, with the nuclear industry, to try to make sure what is the potential of nuclear with clear information by modeling this different scenario to show the nuclear can contribute in addition to the low carbon electricity, and for all this area from heating, from desalination, and also hydrogen is also within that concept. So this initiative call on support cooperation with all different stakeholders for that part. And in addition to this, we're also going to release one publication. We contribute to this brochure Diane just introduced. There is one chapter actually from agency to show what the agency has done. The information is there. In addition to this, we also collect some case studies, more or less similar to what you have already introduced, because I think we need to build a case study to show to the world what can be achieved, what is happening on the ground. We see now a pilot project in North America and also in Europe. I think that is a good example to see what can be done now and what can be done in the future. But I think a lot of work needs to be done in the future, because we need a national policy to clearly indicate the nuclear can contribute not only for the electricity sector, but also for others. And the second, we also need to have the clear understanding from the economic perspective. That is very important. I think technology all there. Nuclear technology is there, and hydrogen production technology is there. It just matters how we can cobble together, show the viable and feasible solution to the world. That is what we want to get this case study. So we hope we can get more countries to have their pilot project on the ground, then to show. Because, for example, China, I talked to them, the pavilions here, they don't have any nuclear information in their pavilion. Hopefully next year they can have some reflection in their very nice mock-up in front of their pavilion. And also China has a lot of efforts in the hydrogen production, but mainly focused on the renewable. The nuclear area actually has big potential, because China is building the first high-temperature gas-cooled reactor, which can generate high-temperature heat. The first unit is already in the commissioning. So a lot of the talk about that application. So we hope China can show that case to the world, how nuclear can contribute not only for the low-temperature electrolysis, but all this high-temperature hybrid chemical process to demonstrate economic value of the nuclear to this hydrogen production. Thank you.
Oh, fantastic. No, thank you so much, Wei, for your words and sharing all that the IAEA is doing to promote this space. Next, Yves, in Europe, we've seen, in the current energy debate and situation, hydrogen has been on the center of the discussion. And nuclear has seen a renewed interest, right, in the debate as well, not only in terms of extension of existing plants, but also in agreements to build new plants, right? We've seen announcements from Poland, from Romania, and others. I wonder of your thoughts and Nuclear Europe's thoughts on this development.
Thank you very much, Carlos. I will give. I think the case for nuclear from hydrogen from nuclear has been somehow made. So I will focus my intervention first on the policy aspects, and I will start with some figures because I think we have to bear in mind what we're talking about. The objective of the ambition of the European Commission on hydrogen is massive, is very high. The objective is to reach in 2030 a volume of 20 megatons of hydrogen being produced in Europe. Today we have 11.5 tons being produced, but mostly from fossil fuel. So we have to go to a full electrolyzing of this production. And today we have only 11.5 million tons, tons of hydrogen being produced by hydrogen. So we are talking about a figure of multiplication by 2,000 in 7 years from now. So this, I would say the step to cross is absolutely massive. Policymakers do not realize what they're talking about. If we want to, for example, let's take some example. If we would like to produce all this hydrogen with nuclear, we're talking about 1,000 terawatt hours of electricity. So it's equivalent of 125 gigawatt of new nuclear installed capacity. I would say the objective is clearly unrealistic if you look at numbers. Nevertheless, we have to have this in mind to consider this. And all in all, we are struggling to replace, for power only, the existing coal gas fleet. So I don't know how we're going to make it. But at least we have to have those figures in mind because at the end of the day, this is the challenge we have to overcome. So in terms of policy landscape, and I will not be politically correct here, but let's be frank. There are some good, bad reason and bad reason for hydrogen to be promoted at European level. The good reasons have been said. The need to have a new feedstock, fully decarbonized for industry is absolutely key, and we'll never get anywhere if we don't use hydrogen for some applications. The bad reasons are, to be honest, a very powerful lobbying from gas industry, because they see it as a way to keep a locking effect on gas. Because at the end of the day, they know that if they keep the infrastructure and we cannot make the objective are ambitious, gas will still be there. And the industry economy will still depend on gas. So they have a very powerful lobbying pro hydrogen, but for bad reasons. The other bad reason is, I would say, this is, I would say, the card trump for lazy policymakers. Also, because it's a way, to solve issues that they are unable to understand or solve. Here I have in mind, for example, the debate in Belgium on should the existing nuclear fleet be prolonged or not. And you have some policymakers in Belgium who say, okay, but it's easy. We're going to import hydrogen from Namibia. There is no, I would say, the least start of any project anywhere on that, but it's a way to say, okay, we are going to solve the issue, don't be afraid. But actually, they have no clue on what exactly they're talking about. So I think we have to also have this in mind, because we have to struggle also against those bad ideas. So in terms of what should be done and avoided, I think what should be avoided is to consider hydrogen as, I would say, the new methane. Some would like it to be seen. I don't think it's a good idea to use hydrogen to be burned in heaters. And I think blending also is a bad idea, because we are sort of using a noble gas to be blended with methane to be burned actually in power plants. Then the other risk is to lose sight of the decarbonization objective. And here it's basically reflect on what I was saying on policy making. We see more and more people say we need to develop electrolyzers and hydrogen because we need to develop electrolyzers. And they are losing sight of the objective, which is to decarbonize. And then we have some stupid ideas coming on the table, like, for instance, let's consider hydrogen being produced in Germany and put it with a green label. This is what has come out of the last vote at the European Parliament, and this is absolutely nonsensical, I would say. But still, we should see a powerful lobbying behind this. So what should be done? What should be done is to have a LCA approach, life cycle assessment of hydrogen, what we're talking about. What is the carbon content of hydrogen? So on that, we also have to include, if ever it's something that is indeed transport, shipment, everything. So the full life cycle of hydrogen should be considered and computed if you want to consider hydrogen as low carbon or not. And just to finish up on my first comments, so today in Europe we consider as Nuclear Europe that grid hydrogen, hydrogen being produced from the grid can be a good idea. We have some countries today which meets the low carbon objective of hydrogen, namely France, Sweden, Finland, are among the countries where the carbon content of power or electricity is low enough so that you can already produce low carbon hydrogen from electrolyzers. And I think this is the way forward.
That's great. No, thanks, Yves, for those challenging words, but those are very much needed to hear. Katie, so in the U.S., hydrogen is still very in the center focus of the energy discussion, right? We've seen even the Department of Energy issuing earlier this year the hydrogen shot, right, in terms of trying to get economic generation of hydrogen. But I know EPRI also has been on the forefront of development and is really engaged in the overall electric sector in the U.S. I wonder if you could elaborate on some of the initiatives EPRI has been involved in this space.
Sure, thank you, Carlos. And wow, thank you all for being here. We have a full house, and it's just, I'm very honored to be a part of this panel. So thank you for having me here today. So as Carlos mentioned, we're focused on electricity. We collaborate with 450 organizations in 45 countries, focused on identifying and solving the challenges to delivering clean, reliable, affordable, and equitable electricity to the public. And as a nonprofit independent energy research institute, we are, collaboration is the heart of what we do. So we are participating in the Nuclear Hydrogen Initiative. It's a 40-member collaborative focused on and dedicated to promoting the potential role of hydrogen in reducing emissions. EPRI is also partnered with GTI Energy in launching the Low Carbon Resources Initiative. LCRI is a consortium of more than 53 members and also numerous non-government and government organizations in our affinity groups. And so LCRI conducts research focused on accelerating the deployment of low and zero carbon energy technologies. And we're focused on the production, distribution, and application of low carbon alternative energy carriers. So, and the cross-cutting technologies that enable their integration at scale, because scale is really what we're talking about. So as we mentioned earlier, there is significant interest worldwide for hydrogen production via nuclear. Our experience is currently fairly conceptual and bench scale, so there's much development still needed. So an integrated nuclear hydrogen production system could be a viable alternative use for power, both thermal and electric. When selling electricity directly to the grid can sometimes be economically unfavorable. So at a small scale, hydrogen could be used on site for cooling main generators. At a larger scale, it can be sold to support a local hydrogen economy. So EPRI research, published in December 2021, explored the incorporation of a vertically integrated construction, installation, operation, deployment model, leveraging high temperature operation, advanced non-light water reactors for highly efficient production of hydrogen to interface with the existing natural gas network. So blending with the existing natural gas network can be a viable, cost-effective option. And it's to decarbonizing heating and electricity generation, especially in regions where suitable renewable sources are limited. So I have some exciting news, and I'll just read these because it's hard for me to embed these in my brain. So hydrogen production at nuclear plants in the US. In 2022, Exelon at 9 Mile Point will have 1 megawatt low temperature electrolyzer, 430 kilograms per day. In 2023, Energy Harbor, Davis-Bessel, 2 megawatts low temperature electrolyzer, making changes to switch shard to prepare for hundreds of megawatts. In 2023-2024, Xcel Energy, Prairie Island, will have a high temperature steam electrolysis at 90 kilograms per day. And to be determined, Arizona Public Service at Palo Verde, low temperature electrolysis plus storage, transported to peaking plant to produce 200 megawatts during peak. EPRI, our generation sector, is sub on this. It's a U.S. Department of Energy award. And I'll just mention a couple reports because I think that part of this is information sharing. And so you're welcome to come talk to me. But I just thought I'd talk about a technical update that talks about nuclear beyond electricity, landscape of opportunities, a technical brief, rethinking deployment scenarios for advanced reactors, scalable nuclear energy for zero carbon synthetic fuels and products, and a technical update motivating and valuing the flexibility of nuclear energy systems. So thank you again for hearing from me, and thank you for having me on the panel. Back to you, Carlos.
Appreciate it, Katie, so much, and exciting to some things that EPRI is doing, so I really appreciate you sharing that. Yves, maybe just going back to you, I'll just maybe a couple of comments, each of you. So in the EU this year, the EU taxonomy, right, has included nuclear as part of their policy. I don't know if you can comment the impact of that perhaps on hydrogen and nuclear, if any.
I would say I think it's positive first. The impact is positive for policymakers because it allows us to be back in the conversation and to be back in being considered as a sustainable source of energy through a taxonomy allows us now to be included, at least mentioned, and then we need to see exactly what would be the outcome of that, but to be considered in the broader debate. And I here have in mind, for example, one very recent one coming from the European Parliament. Now the European Parliament has voted a resolution asking for nuclear to be included in the financial scheme of Repower EU, which is the initiative of the Commission from last May. So I think it's a good signal because it shows that we now can get support, and we see more and more support, by the way, from the European Parliament, which is also a signal of some much more positive views from member states and from, in general, from the public opinion on nuclear.
No, thank you very much. Wei, from a regulatory perspective, I don't know if perhaps you could comment on, as we see these demonstration projects to produce hydrogen from nuclear, are there any challenges from a regulatory perspective you think we need to overcome?
Thank you very much. As I mentioned earlier, that is the reflect the nuclear national policy is very important. If you look at the whole world, look at NDC, how many NDC has a nuclear there? That is the big challenge now we have to overcome. Because some countries, even they are using nuclear, but they still not reflect nuclear, the value in their NDC commitment. So we hope country can be more bold enough to do that, to reflect that one. Then we can also reflect the detail about what nuclear can contribute to show. But obviously from the nuclear sector, we need to show the good case that is the nuclear can contribute not only for electricity, but also others sectors. So that's the case. We're happy to see the case just mentioned by the EPR APRI. And that is also reflected in our case study. We want to show that one is viable, but we need more data to support that. Because as we understand that when the technology is available or is feasible, we still need to, because we talk about the scale. When you scale up, you have to look at the economic implication of that, to see if it's competitive to the other low carbon technology when they talk about hydrogen production. That's another area we have to look at. So for agency, we have we developed one a special tool we call Hydrogen Economic Evaluation Program, which is the tool we can use for our member states to allow them to do some study for that sector, in addition to what I already mentioned in the previous intervention. Thank you.
No, thank you. Thank you for those insights. Kirsty, you mentioned briefly about the costs and the economics of this model. I wonder if you could elaborate a little bit more on the benefits perhaps of the nuclear hydrogen model and maybe that balance. Does nuclear power needs to just produce electricity or just for hydrogen, that balancing act? How do you see that?
Yeah, I mean, so even with an existing gigawatt scale light water plant, you can produce really relatively cost-effective zero-carbon hydrogen today. And we did a study looking at Diablo Canyon, for example, the last remaining nuclear plant in California, and found that producing hydrogen between $2 and $2.50 a kilogram would be, completely viable at very large quantities, emissions-free hydrogen for California. That's just with one of those big old light water gigawatt scale grandfather's technology reactors. Now, if you start, deploying the higher temperature reactors, moving away from a traditional project-based construction approach into a product-based manufacturing approach, where you move into a high productivity factory to make your units, you can have a lot of parallelization in the manufacturing assembly. You can apply a lot more automation. You can have incredible quality control and assurance. You can have a very centralized, regulatory oversight, and importantly, you can achieve standardization in the design, which all contribute to, much more favorable economics in terms of the costs of the unit compared to building one-of-a-kind traditional construction-based projects. So yes, we have many opportunities to achieve, really cost-competitive outcomes for nuclear technology by moving into that manufacturing-based approach. And then once you have that, you've got these units that can make power and heat. 80% of our energy consumption is outside the electricity sector, and a lot of it is heat, whether it's in industry, whether it's, replacing heat from coal-fired applications in industrial uses, or indeed, if you were to apply this heat and power for the production of synthetic fuels. Now, the Gigafactory we've modeled actually into the UK Energy Systems net zero pathways through Aurora Energy Research and also through a project with the Energy Systems Catapult, two really excellent modeling organizations in the UK. And what we found is that the Gigafactory turns out to be super useful, both for dedicated hydrogen production, but also with the option to switch to generating electricity during a seasonal lull in wind and solar generation in a grid with a very high penetration of wind and solar in a future, scenario. That creates incredible value for the future electricity grid because it mitigates the need for additional capacity to be built or, massive energy storage, which, is currently a hypothetical position anyway. So multiple energy services offering value across the whole decarbonization agenda. Thanks.
No, excellent points. And maybe just to wrap it up, Deanna, on the policy front, we've seen from 2020 to 2021, well over 20 countries issuing their hydrogen roadmaps and policies from Canada to Chile to the United States and others. But wonder if you could elaborate on perhaps some recommendations. What's perhaps missing on some of these policy roadmaps that perhaps could help promote more nuclear hydrogen?
I think the main messages for policymakers and the main conclusions and recommendations are fairly simple, actually, but they're worth repeating. Hydrogen is only part of net zero if it is produced from non-emitting sources of power. Good policy measures what matters, and then we manage what we measure. Color coding of hydrogen is nonsensical. What we need to measure is the carbon intensity of hydrogen production, the cost of hydrogen production, which I'm going to come back to in just a moment, and excuse me, the dispatchability. How well does the hydrogen production, the supply side, match the demand side requirements? So that's the first key message. Hydrogen is only part of net zero if it's produced from non-emitting sources. Also, it's only part of net zero if there is sufficient non-emitting electricity or non-emitting power to provide all the needs first, including electrification of transportation. So if you're diverting clean electricity to produce hydrogen, and then you're ending up having to ramp up natural gas or petroleum products for other purposes, then you also have not achieved your objective. These are very simple, easy to understand facts, but they bear repeating because they just bear repeating. Let me just leave that there. On the costs of hydrogen, policymakers and decision makers broadly, and frankly, this cuts across all communities. It cuts across policy dialogue, academic dialogue, industry dialogue, and so on. We need to be taking a systems view to costs. Let's not fall into the trap of talking about the levelized cost of hydrogen as a plant-level cost. We know that the value chain costs, storage, transformation, and transportation, and the system-level costs, which are how the hydrogen consumption and production interacts with the rest of the energy system. We know that those costs can change overall costs significantly. So we need to be comparing apples to apples, not apples to oranges. That requires systems level thinking, and it requires quite sophisticated modeling. Our own modeling, just to give you a sense of this, is that and this is in our report that we published about a month ago, available on our website, is that in an environment, is that the system costs of hydrogen that include the plant level costs as well as value chain costs as well as system grid level costs depend tremendously on the local conditions. They depend on regional endowments. They depend on what the demand is. Is the demand a steady state industrial demand that requires sort of 24/7 constant inflow of a chemical feedstock? Or is it a demand that is to meet peaking power consumption? It really varies by the demand side. It varies by the physicality of your distribution networks. It varies by the cost of electricity. And while the cost of solar in the Middle East is very inexpensive, The cost of transporting hydrogen from the Middle East to Europe is very significant and changes the overall cost profile. So systems level thinking is so important. We find that in a France-like environment, we're anticipating a 2035 timeline where hydrogen will be produced mainly from low and high temperature electrolysis on the grid and consumed mainly by industrial users. In that setting, we find the cost of hydrogen will likely be around $2 per kilogram. But as soon as you start changing the parameters, the distance, the profile of the demand curve, the different parameters of a different country, that can grow 100, 200, 300, 400%. So it's an incredibly large range of costs. So anyone who tells you they have pinpointed the cost of hydrogen is not telling you the full story. There's still a great deal of uncertainty, and we need systems level thinking. And that would be my advice to policymakers.
Great. No, you're right. Spot on. Thank you, Diane. And indeed, we have the work cut out for us. I think there's a great opportunity ahead in the next decades here for nuclear to have an even more relevant role in decarbonization, particularly in producing clean hydrogen. I would like you to perhaps join me in thanking the speakers today for their participation. Thank you. Thank you so much. We're honored with your presence, and thank you for all of you in the audience. I'd like to remind you there's a lot of activity still at the Net Zero Future Pavilion here, many different sessions. We invite you to check our schedule, and we wish you a good afternoon. Thank you.